Hello and welcome to another Tophet Alliance Church update for this weekend of July 18th. We're beginning to get back into a little bit more normal routine, or at least a summer routine. So we invite you to join on Sunday for a 10 o'clock service. And if you can't join in person, you can always catch the live stream, or you can catch it later on, watch it at your convenience. And the links for those, you can get those from our YouTube channel or our website. Links for those are posted in the email version of this update. We are looking forward to the fall, in which we can restart some things like Sunday school and some of our seniors ministries, and I think some of our life groups then can get it back in person. And over the summer, as I'm visiting with families, I'll be exploring how people would like to be involved. If you have questions, or if you have ideas, or if you would like to get involved in a specific ministry, don't hesitate to phone me or call me or email me. And this Sunday, following the service, there is a barbecue. You're invited to stay for that. Just bring whatever you want for your family to eat. The church is going to provide coffee, tea, juice, mustard, ketchup, relish, all of those kinds of good things. I want to talk about moving forward in faith. As I talk with people about the reopening of Alberta, I hear both excitement and reservation. We welcome the new freedom, and some are pretty confident that the rate of vaccinations will stay ahead of the variants. Others aren't so sure. We look forward to programs resuming, and some wonder if they'll be able to manage the renewed pace of weekly events. After all, we've gotten kind of used to more white space on our calendars and a shorter commute to work. And at church, things have changed. Even relationships have changed, both through absence and to a degree through the polarized opinions related to the pandemic. We can feel unsettled, even fearful. But Jesus calls us to move forward in faith. He has a good plan for us as individuals and as a church. Will it be different? Certainly. Will it be good? Absolutely. Will there be challenges to overcome? Yes, there are always challenges. But rather than comparing to what was, Jesus calls us to join him in what could be. He's with us, and he continues to call us to follow him and to make disciples. I also want to talk about some things that have been in the news, things that touch our hearts. It's hard to scan the news without stumbling across headlines that make our hearts ache. We're saddened by the loss of life at that condo collapse in Florida. Closer to home, there was a crane collapse in Kelowna that took some lives. We continue to grieve with our Indigenous community as more unmarked burial sites are found as residential school sites. It's hard to imagine the emotions that those separated families endured. And those are emotions that are triggered anew as each additional site is discovered. We grieve as well as we see churches being burned in acts of vandalism. An event that may be related to this has touched our District Alliance family. On Sunday evening, July 4th, the church building, which was home to the Calgary Vietnamese Alliance Church and the House of Prayer Alliance Church, suffered a fire, and according to a news article, it's believed that to have been deliberately set. We don't know the motivation, but we can imagine how heartbreaking it must be for our sister congregation in Calgary, who, like us, had just returned to in-person services. I've included a link in the email version that you can read for a CTV news article of that. I want to read something that our district superintendent, Brent Trask, wrote about that. He says, WCD, our Western Canadian District family, as you may already know, Sunday night, July 4th, our church communities of Calgary Vietnamese Alliance Church and House of Prayer Alliance Church were met with the devastating news of a building fire. Our hearts and prayer are with both of these communities during this difficult time. Would you also intentionally stand in prayer for our brothers and sisters? For those wanting to give financial support, donations can now be made to your local church with the designation Calgary Church Fire Compassion Fund to be forwarded to the Western Canadian District Office. If you feel led to donate to those needs of those congregations, you can designate the Calgary Church Fire, the Calgary Church Fire Compassion Fund with your offerings, and we will be sure that that's forwarded to our district office as they're coordinating the assistance for that. All of this news can be overwhelming, and it can be tempting to simply ignore news because it's too discouraging. It is helpful to remember that Jesus is called the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He can help us to discover rhythms of life that enable us to be aware but not overwhelmed. And he will help us to discover the ways in which we can find practical ways of being involved. This Sunday, the message is part of our Worth Repeating series, and it's called The Fool. When you've read through the Psalms and you arrive at Psalm 53, you may wonder, haven't I read this before? And you have, since it's almost the same as Psalm 14. It's repeated with only a few minor variations. Now, it's easy to scurry past these Psalms since they describe a fool who doesn't believe in God. And after all, we're believers, so it isn't talking about us. Yet, God considers this passage worth repeating. And it's quoted again by Paul in Romans as he explains the way of salvation. So it's worth slowing down to consider what God has to say to us as we live within a culture that has pushed God to the margins. In both Psalm 14, verse 2 and 53, verse 2, we read, "The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God." I'm always intrigued by the questions that surface as I study and meditate on God's Word. It's fascinating that this description of a God-denying fool is included twice in the prayer book of God's people. It speaks to the religious culture in which it was written, and it applies to the non-religious culture we find ourselves in today. So I encourage you to read both Psalm 14 and 53, perhaps in more than one translation. Read it more than one time. Do you spot the differences? Consider what God might be saying to us and how this message can be used to bring good news to the troubled culture in which we live. I'm looking forward to this Sunday as I get to talk about these Psalms, which have always puzzled me by their repetition. And of course, as we get to enjoy a barbecue following the service. So hope to see you here. Hope you can join. Take care, and God bless.